Welcome to the Politics Guys. I'm Michael Baranowski, a political scientist at Northern Kentucky University. With me today is my co-host, attorney and Republican strategist Jay Carson. We start with our best wishes for Senator John McCain, who this week was found to have a particularly aggressive form of brain cancer. It's actually the same type of cancer that killed Senator Ted Kennedy, coincidentally, also around the time of a major healthcare vote in the Senate. In that case, it was the passage of Obamacare in 2009. And as I mentioned in the Friday preview newsletter, John McCain is actually the only politician whose campaign I've contributed to. That was back in 2000 when he tried to ride that Straight Talk Express to the Republican nomination, back when I was still, I guess, nominally a Republican. And of course, unfortunately, he lost out to George W. Bush, who I would argue is probably the worst president of my lifetime and maybe one of the worst of all time. That's another story. But anyway, John McCain was, I think, the last politician I felt a real sort of passion for. And while my view of him has changed a bit since then, his courage, his tenacity, his fighting spirit, I think they'll always be an inspiration to me. And I certainly hope that he fights back against this. I know he's a fighter, and he recovers as much as one can from something as awful as this. Jay, your thoughts on Senator McCain?
Yeah, I'll tell you, as a Republican, of course, I've obviously had my frustrations with Senator McCain on a lot of issues, but he is undoubtedly an American hero, and someone who is someone, the kind of person that we would want to elect to the Senate, whether we agree with him all the time or not. Is as far as the commitment he's demonstrated to this country goes above and beyond probably anybody else in the Capitol. I had the opportunity to meet and speak with John McCain one time, probably 25 some years ago, when I was an intern at an organization hosting a big benefit dinner. He was one of the people there, so I had a conversation which consisted of, I think they're ready to serve dinner now, sir. To which he responded, thanks. So again, brushes with greatness. But again, it's I tell that story just because it's cool to be able to say, look, I was in the presence of one of these people who is, again, truly an American hero, and we wish him all the best.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on. The confusing journey, I think you could call it, of the Senate healthcare bill, or really rather bills. There are now at least 4 major proposals out there by my count. Well, that continued on this week. Now, what we know now, or at least what I think we're fairly certain of, is that there aren't 50 votes for any of the proposals, but Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says there will be a vote next week. Now, it's not likely he expects to pass anything, at least not next week, but a vote will force Republicans to own their refusal to repeal Obamacare. And if there's a strategy here, and with McConnell, I'd say it's a good bet that there is, it's what I'd call the long shot hope that a no vote on repeal will put enough heat on moderate Republicans, especially those who voted yes on the repeal bill in 2015 when Barack Obama was president and they knew would veto it, that they'll be willing to reconsider and maybe, if not vote for any of the current proposals, at least find a way to vote for something close. Now, where President Trump stands on all this, well, I don't think even he knows, except he's sure nothing is his fault, and it might be good to let Obamacare fail, as he said, to bring Democrats to the table, which to me is either remarkably ignorant or remarkably callous, even for Trump. So that's sort of my take on it. Jay, what are your thoughts on where we are now and what might happen going forward?
Well, I think the McConnell plan to move for a vote is fascinating in that this is something you don't see that often. It's pretty rare that you see something put up for a no vote, and especially it's something that is putting some of his party perhaps at risk, perhaps not. But I understand the thinking. The senators who live in red states, predominantly red states, will be able to say, look, we did our best. There was a bill and we voted for it. and we didn't have the numbers. And you can blame that on these couple defectors who, in states that their defection may help them. My sense is it does not. But I think that would be the strategy. Now, whether there's something else down the road, the next step, people are saying, well, let's move forward with tax reform. The idea being that tax reform is it would be easier, more popular. I'm not so sure that's the case, but I think that's sort of where the default position at this point. Trump's attitude towards this has been troubling, and we can, you and I can get into who's to blame. I actually put more blame on Senate Republicans than I do on Trump for this the thing falling apart. That said, Trump is sort of an accomplice in that here was an opportunity to exercise presidential leadership, and he really didn't, other than saying some goofy stuff about, okay, well, let's let it fail, which raises some other funny questions. And I'm telling you, you have to stay here till it's fixed, which he really doesn't have the authority to command. But
yeah. Well, a couple of things before we get into the Trump comments on Obamacare failing and so forth, which I want to address at least a little bit. I also wanted to talk about Mitch McConnell. I've been thinking about Mitch McConnell a lot. I might have more to say to him in our mini show, bonus show thing. But for now, I want to say, Mitch McConnell has this reputation of being sort of a legislative mastermind. And while I'll admit, I'm fairly certain that he is a very sharp student of Senate history, Senate rules and procedures, knows those very well. The fact of the matter is up until a couple of years ago, he's never had the opportunity to really try to lead a majority in the Senate with the president where he could actually make something happen. So all we really know about Mitch McConnell in terms of his ability to get things done is what we've seen in, really in the last couple of years. And what we've seen is essentially nothing. And so I think his reputation might be a little bit, certainly at this point, undeserved. Mitch McConnell's not responsible for anything truly important or historic happening. And as far as I can see now, certainly he's been dealt a bad hand, but he's no LBJ.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Although I would take less. I don't know. I don't want to blame this as much on McConnell as I guess I would on the party in general. Also, there was a piece by, I think it was either Kimberly Strassel or Bill McGurn in the Wall Street Journal about a couple weeks ago. The problem is Republicans are just not team players, and I understand fully the idea of you want to stand on principle. Some folks like your Rand Pauls, who will always be that way, and others who are perhaps more finger in the wind, moderate. But regardless, you've got to be able to play as a team, and the Republican Party quite typically has not in the legislative world. And this is, I think would be something fascinating for you to look at as a scholarly in pursuit of how often do Republicans hang together versus Democrats. My sense is that Republicans have much harder times holding majorities than what Democrats do for what may be a bunch of reasons. But there should have been a plan A and a plan B and a plan C that had been sort of conceived and sold over the last couple of years, and we just didn't have that. I think that's the biggest failure.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention, and I completely slipped my mind, but when I say that McConnell's no LBJ, and some people might be saying, well, sure, Johnson was a president and so forth. Johnson was, for listeners who don't know,
the Senate.
Exactly, one of the most impressive, many people would say, majority leaders in the history of the Senate, and he's also just a fascinating individual. Robert Caro has a series of 4 at this point books in a biography, in a very extended biography of Johnson, that are some of the most fascinating reading that I've had the pleasure of consuming. I highly recommend them. But in terms of in terms of President Trump's role, I think one thing that I feel confident about is that it's really difficult to get big things done without strong leadership from the president, and we just haven't seen this now with his. We've
or
already.
I would even say with lukewarmish sort of support from the president.
Well, you can't
Go
also
ahead.
you can't lead if you don't know what you're doing. You can't lead if you don't understand the issue. And well, look at I joked about President Trump, saying that nothing's his fault and so forth. But I mean, Trump wants a win. He clearly is very interested in pushing away everything that has any kind of scent of Barack Obama. But aside from that, he just like the thing about letting Obamacare fail. I don't think he understands what that means exactly. But I do know that there are a number of people in the administration who have at least a pretty good idea of how they could do that. For instance, they could not enforce the individual mandate part of the law, which the administration has given some kind of initial suggestions that they might do that, which to me raises the question of, gee, doesn't the president have a duty to faithfully execute the laws? I seem to recall a lot of conservatives worked up about that.
Yeah, well, no, I would interject on that. I don't know that the enforcement mechanism, regardless, even if you wanted to enforce it really strenuously, is all that great or all that robust.
Sure,
but
that's fair, but
So.
you can push harder or less hard on that. But it just reminded me of how many conservatives got so worked up when they argued that Obama wasn't faithfully executing the law when it came to immigration. But I'm not hearing that about Trump and Obamacare. But anyway, so that's one thing they could do to make it fail. A second thing that it seems like they're doing is they're not going to do much to publicize or promote the exchange sign-up period. And that's been shown in a number of studies to increase enrollment among healthier people. And they're really important to get in the exchanges because, of course, the enrollment for healthier people helps to subsidize the enrollment for less healthy people.
And if you don't get the healthy people in there, you get the so-called death spiral.
Yeah, exactly. And then
I just really like saying death spiral.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Can we add like a echo effect and like deep booming voice thing?
Yeah, I'll get right on that, Jay. But and the final thing is they could stop payments to exchange insurers to defray those costs of covering the poorest and sickest folks. Now that's mandated under the law, but Congress never appropriated the funds for that. And so while it's still working its way through the court system, President Obama's administration funded it. Trump has funded it too, but on a kind of a month-to-month sort of basis, on a short-term basis, and he's kind of dangling it over the heads of the insurers. And right now, this is this period where insurers are putting in their rate requests. And of course, there's a lot of differentiation state by state. These proposals vary a lot, but the average is around 33%, and various analysis peg about 20% of that due to uncertainty created by the Trump administration and Congress. So a lot of the problems with the exchanges are just that insurers understandably say, well, geez, what's going to happen? We need to prepare for the worst here. And so that's why this increase proposal is so high. And so certainly the failure of the exchanges could become not so much a self-fulfilling prophecy, but the Trump administration could do an awful lot to make that happen. And it seems like they are. And I think that's really tragic because there's going to be a real human cost to that.
Well, I would point out though, I mean, Trump at one time kind of rattled his sword over maybe cutting the subsidies, but decided not to. And I don't think I really don't think he would do that. Not so much because he wouldn't want to see Obamacare fail, but there would be the sense of, hey, here are some insurance companies who would be very angry, and I mean, and I think that's something he gets. Yeah. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think maybe you're
if
right.
If I do this, private businesses will fail. Or we'll lose a lot of money. We'll lose so much money they'll be forced out. So I don't think he'll do that. But there is still a worry that the courts might.
Yeah. And, I think though, I think you might have a point there, but I also think that Trump has shown no understanding of the importance of instilling confidence And, I think, my God, who would he be the worst Fed chairman of all time? With that kind of thing. He just has no idea. The whole idea of strong and steady, stable leadership, that's, he's Captain Chaos. And this is just not a
Yeah.
very.
And I can make this, statement sort of broadly. Businesses operate on predictability. And that's particularly true in something like the insurance business, particularly true in highly regulated businesses, is that they need to be able to rely on the playing field is going to be more or less the same tomorrow as it is today. And these sort of noises that Trump makes kind of on and off here and there aren't helpful. Now, I think there also you might get to a point where the industry sort of discounts a lot of what he says. In that, look, he's not going to really do that because he doesn't really do anything. He just sort of says stuff. But there are other things I would say he could do in the absence of a repeal and replace bill that he's sort of moved forward with a little bit. And that is some regulatory loosening that would help revive or help make it easier for insurers who sell plans to employers and maybe get more people covered that way. That's going to be sort of an around the edges thing. It's not going to change anything fundamentally. But I think that's something his administration could do just in terms of releasing some of these regulatory burdens that were put on through the regulatory process.
Before we move on, we want to thank our first sponsor today, Dollar Shave Club, the smarter choice. Get a great shave at a great price, conveniently delivered right to your door with Dollar Shave Club. It's summer. You probably know that. It's hot out there. It's hot in Cincinnati. I bet it's hot in Cleveland. Jay, is it hot in Cleveland?
It is. It is hot in Cleveland.
Summer is quite possibly, right, the best time of the year to shave off all that heat-trapping, sweaty hair. And, you could stop with your face. But hey, maybe it's time to try something really radical. You might look amazing with a shaved head, or I don't know, think how streamlined you'd be if you just went all out. Shave it all off. I mean, if not now, when? And whether you're planning to shave your face or do, like a full Monty shave thing, I can't think of any better tools for the job than what you'll get for Dollar Shave Club. Jay, I don't know if I've convinced you to do the kind of Yul Brynner, Jason Statham, Vin Diesel thing, but you like Dollar Shave Club too, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll go that far, but I will tell you on my vacation last week, I grew a beard just because I was just sitting on the beach, kind of doing nothing, and could get away with it, but. I did have to go back to work and look respectable once more. And I can tell you the Dollar Shave Club razor sort of wiped out the beard with just a couple strokes. I was impressed. And usually if you're shaving like a lot, I mean, that can be kind of painful and not an easy process, but it was super smooth. And I came back looking my conservative best.
That's very important. Certainly for a conservative like you don't want to look like some kind of hairy hippie. Now, and for a limited time, new members get their first month of the Executive Razor with a tube of their excellent Dr. Carver shave butter for only $5 with free shipping. And after that, your razors are just a few bucks a month. It's a $15 value for only $5. And in that first month's box, you'll get this great weighty handle, a full cassette that has 4 cartridges and a tube of the shave butter. And after that first month, replacement cartridges ship automatically at their regular price. No hidden fees, no commitments. Cancel anytime you like, but you're not going to want to cancel. Trust me. You can only get this offer exclusively at dollarshaveclub.com/TPG. That's dollarshaveclub.com/TPG. Okay, so back to healthcare, Jay. So let me get your prediction. Will this Congress pass a significant overhaul of Obamacare? What's your best guess on that?
I have to say no at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of my thinking. I just don't see how with those factions in the Republican Party, I just don't see how it happens. And some people say, well, the Democrats will come to the table and so forth. I will believe that when I see it.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think there has been. I've seen some of this Pollyannish, sort of kumbaya. Can't we all get together and so forth? And I would agree. That's not the case. It's not going to happen. For a lot of reasons. There's no real advantage yet for Democrats to try to sign on to this. any type of reform. Now, as Obamacare continues to unravel, which I believe it will.
With Trump's help.
Although there were some Democrats that yourself included said, "Oh, things are looking better now." But let's, I think that blame will fall largely on Republicans if they can make the point of this was, President Obama's idea in the first place. We tried to get rid of it. Maybe that buys them some time. Maybe you're able to pull a couple Democrats over. But the climate that we have right now, which is a polarized Congress, and look, a polarized America on this issue, and lack of any sort of leadership from the president, I don't see any sort of bipartisan solution, at least in the near term, at least not till after the midterm elections.
Agreed. Before we move on, we'd like to welcome our newest Politics Guys insiders, Doug, Forrest, and Kelly, all of whom became Politics Guys benefactors, which means that in addition to helping support the show, they'll be getting access to the insiders blog with our commentary on politics and policy during the week, plus a weekly Politics Guys update post with the inside scoop on the show, upcoming guests, and exclusive What We're Reading content. And if you're interested in joining Doug, Forrest, and Kelly and getting exclusive insiders content and update, you can learn more and sign up by going to our Patreon page at patreon.com/politicsguys or by clicking on the Patreon link at politicsguys.com. Right. So Sean Spicer, Sean Spicer's free now, right? I mean, that's a great thing for him because late this week, there was that big news about the major shakeup in the Trump communications operation. We'll start at the top for that post of communications director, which has been vacant since May, believe it or not. Geez, you can hardly tell. The president has chosen financier Anthony Scaramucci because obviously what President Trump really needs to right the ship is one more ultra-rich white guy. I'm sure it's going to fix it all up. But that move led to the resignation of Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who I think it surprised a lot of people in how sudden it is, though Spicer said he's going to stay on a little bit to help with the transition. His post is going to be filled by Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Until now, she was Spicer's chief deputy. So, Jay, with Trump's job approval at under 40% and trending down, amazingly, combined with not a single piece of major legislation passed in 6 months, is this just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, or do you think this could be a positive move for the president?
Well, I've got to think it can't get worse. I think it's a move that you have to make. Plainly, the communications were not what the administration wanted, or let me put it this way: it wasn't effective. Maybe it was what they wanted, but which wasn't effective. And I think Sean Spicer had an absolutely impossible job. That's not an easy job, even under the best of circumstances. And he was sort of Sean Spicer, I think it's been pointed out by some media outlets, was more of a mainstream kind of guy, more of what's the word I'm looking for? But he was sort of brought in by Reince Priebus and not a Trump guy.
No, not a Trump, one kind of Republican establishment.
More of an establishment sort of figure.
Definitely.
And I think there was just a really mixed way that he tried to do that. He tried to sort of adopt the Trump persona in the beginning of being very combative, and it just didn't work for him. Maybe it would work for others, but regardless, I don't blame Sean Spicer for the failure to communicate. I think he was tasked with an impossible job, and I think he did the right thing. And I think history will vindicate him in this, in stepping aside and saying, okay, you now have a clean slate to work with, which is another way to saying, look, if this all tanks, it's not on me anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. An impossible job. Especially when you talk about the Trump persona, the Trump approach, which it seems to me to be lie like hell, and when you're called on it, double down. So that's not really necessarily a Republican establishment sort of approach to these sort of things. They tend to be a little more subtle than that. But yeah. So I don't. I think it couldn't. I don't know if it's going to hurt a whole lot. Although Scaramucci is not like he has any kind of experience with this. I think that Trump is just maybe turning more and more to the sort of people he's felt comfortable with his whole life. But if he thinks that that's going to save him, I think he is sorely mistaken. Before we kind of move on with that, I want to thank our second responsor. No, how about sponsor? Yeah, this week. Okay, yeah, more coffee, Mike. ZipRecruiter. Good help. Good help is hard to find. Of course it is. Why? Because the majority of people can't be above average. Jay, it's basic math, right? And interesting factoid here, at least for me. In a survey a while back of college professors, around 90% said that they were above average teachers. I kid you not. Now, of course, I'm way above average, right? But
well, absolutely, yeah. That's self-evident.
It's hard to believe that so many of my colleagues are so deluded. Anyway, the fact is that there are so many average and below average people out there. It means that you've got a problem if you're looking for high quality help, especially if you're running a small business, those Fortune 500 type resources at your disposal, which is where ZipRecruiter comes in. With ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites with one click. Then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your job better than anyone else. And that's why they're different, because unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you, it finds them. In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 24 hours. There's no juggling emails, calls to your office. You just screen, rate, manage candidates all in one place with their easy-to-use dashboard. Now, find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, Politics Guys listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguy, not politics guys, just politics guy, as in you're a politics guy who's going to get a great person for your job opening. So ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguy. And once more, because 3 times is the charm, to try it for free, go to ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguy. All right, moving on to our next story, Jeff Sessions. Boy, it's been a rough week for Attorney General Jeff Sessions. First, in an interview with the New York Times, President Trump expressed his strong disagreement, I'll call it, with Sessions' decisions to recuse himself from the Russia investigation, saying that had he known Sessions would do so, he would have picked someone else for the job. Then late in the week came allegations that Sessions lied in his confirmation hearings when he said that he didn't discuss any campaign or policy issues with Russian officials or surrogates during the campaign. However, unlike the case of former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, there's no independent proof of any discussions, only the word of then Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak. So, Jay, what do you make of all this? Are Sessions' days as Attorney General numbered? Should they be?
I would say I certainly hope not. For the reason that at this point, I would say, and whether he realizes or not, Donald Trump needs Jeff Sessions more than Sessions needs Trump. If Sessions were to be let go, I think he would his estimation in your eyes and probably a lot of others on the left would immediately skyrocket. And look, I understand you've got some policy differences with him, as do I. But there is still the sense that Jeff Sessions is one of the grown-ups in the room, and he did the grown-up thing by recusing himself on that investigation. Even though I don't know that he probably had to, but I think it was the right thing to do for avoid any appearance of impropriety. And the other funny thing, of course, is that Trump says if he knew he was going to do that, he wouldn't have hired him. Well, obviously, Sessions didn't know that he would be called upon to do something like that. And that's just again, it's very, and look, this isn't even just a presidential thing or some sort of insider politics piece that, I've gained from working in the system, or this is just common sense, is you don't diss your team publicly. It's just not cool. It's a classless thing to do. Um, and I just don't understand why Donald Trump keeps doing things like this. Um, uh, again, there were a million things he could have said about Sessions' recusal. First of all, not really discussed it at all. Uh, Secondly, saying I would respectfully disagree with his decision, but I understand, he did what he felt he had to do. Or again, they're throw 1,000 variations on that. But the indication that I wouldn't have hired him before, or he might be let go. I mean, that's um, again, it's just not helpful. And as we I think I'll mention in the bonus show or some other time. I think a lot of conservatives, Republicans have just kind of reached a turning point with Trump. And this would just be another example. So
yeah, I think as for why he does it, I think it's the same sort of reason as for why President Clinton, a very intelligent, sharp guy who understood politics certainly a lot better than President Trump, why he couldn't stop cheating on his wife, and
keep away from the interns.
it's just a fundamental personality flaw. Clinton had his, Trump has his, and in both cases, they really detracted from what these people thought they or wanted to do. And I point out the Clinton thing because, of course, this is a bipartisan sort of thing. It's not like personality flaws are concentrated on the conservative side or anything like that. I will say for the Sessions thing, I agree with you in that you're right that I would be enormously happy if he weren't Attorney General, because I think for policies just disastrously bad. But I also am skeptical of this latest sort of allegation thing. So this is kind of a he said thing. And if you're asking me, do I trust Jeff Sessions or do I trust Sergey Kislyak? Well, I think I'm going to choose Jeff Sessions over there without any additional information. And so this seems a bit sketchy. I really liked the Justice Department spokesperson's comment on this. She said, "Obviously, I cannot comment on the reliability of what anonymous sources describe in a wholly uncorroborated intelligence intercept that the Washington Post has not seen and has not been provided to me." And I thought, well, there you go.
No, and that is, I'll tell you, that is, I thought exactly the same thing. That is fantastic. That is like the appropriate punch back, landing a punch at the media, that actually, makes Sessions. And that's a Sessions win, and it's so much better than the fake news, just yelling fake news.
Great point. That's a great point. I absolutely agree with you on that. So sure, people can speculate. It's a big, juicy story and so forth. But to me, this is exactly the sort of thing that, and I'm guilty of doing that sometimes. Think, well, what do I think went on, and what kind of weird theory can I weave? But this isn't an episode of Homeland or something like this. This is real life, and I don't want to get past what we kind of know for sure. And so I'm going to leave it at that, if that's okay with you, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, then, moving on. This week marked the initial meeting of President Trump's Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity, or as I like to call it, the guys President Trump assembled to show that he beat Hillary in the popular vote too. That might not catch on. Anyway, the commission is definitely weighted toward people who believe that vote fraud is a major issue, despite almost unanimous scholarly evidence to the contrary, as well as the dissenting views of the vast majority of secretaries of state across the country, and that's secretaries of state of both parties. The commission is already the subject of 7 lawsuits challenging its composition, the openness of its meetings, and other related concerns. Now, Democrats are particularly worried that the committee is the first step towards some sort of national vote integrity law that's far more concerned with making it harder for Democrats to vote than it is with the integrity of the system. So, Jay, what do you expect to see from the commission?
I expect that they will. First of all, I think you're probably painting it with a darker, more ominous brush than need be. I've been on the record before, and I'll go on the record yet again as Secretary of State John Houston in Ohio has been on the record as I can point you to links showing that there are vote fraud does happen. I think there were 80 some documented cases in Ohio. There has been, I'm trying to think of the organization that tracks this, but they track convictions, and it's somehow about close to 1,000 nationwide from the last election. So yes, vote fraud does happen, but I think it happens on the margins. It is not the wholesale, as Trump suggested, millions of votes in Virginia that were cast illegally. It is tens, hundreds that are cast illegally. Now, to me, that still is a tremendous problem, and I would put it to people on the left who, if you don't think it's a problem, imagine if the story were reversed of here are X 50 people who were legitimately registered to vote, able to vote, allowed to vote, but turned away at the polls, because the effect is the same. People are disenfranchised if somebody else gets to vote twice or 3 times or 10 times. So I think there's going to be that you are going to find vote fraud. There will be recommendations at some point that will come out, probably years from now, about steps that could be taken. And I think a lot of states have already taken those steps. Some have, some haven't, and it'll have to be up to state legislatures. I don't see any National Voting Procedure Act because, first of all, I don't think it would be constitutional. But in terms of deciding what happens in a state's electoral processes.
Well,
but I don't know. I could be wrong. I mean, I'm
Sure.
getting way ahead of myself.
Sure. To get around the constitutionality issue, you could always just link it to a nice little pot of state funds for supporting that sort of thing. So, I mean, there are ways around that. But I think I agree with you, obviously, in that it happens. It's not non-existent. I agree with you in that it happens at the margins. I would challenge the numbers that you said. I believe it's a lot less than that. I think what people tend to focus on who try to promote this as a big issue are dual registrations, but there's a big difference between being registered in 2 places and voting in 2 places. And also I'd point out
what I'm talking about, to be clear, are actual convictions for actual double voting, not just double registration.
I'm pretty sure, and I'll try to find some data on this, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot less than what you say. But in any case, all the studies that have looked at this invariably find that the specific type of vote fraud that all of these Republican laws are designed to prevent, which is essentially misrepresentation at the ballot box, showing up, with fake ID or no ID
or no ID.
Right. That's the kind of vote fraud that is almost non-existent. That's far less common than other types of fraud. And so it just, to me, it's pretty clear what's going on. We've talked about this before. When Chris Kovacs comes out and says he's the vice chairman of the panel, when asked if he believes that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 to 5 million votes because of vote fraud, he says we'll probably never know the answer to that question. And I think this is pretty clearly a committee that's made up its mind, and I think there's very good reason to believe it's going to cherry pick data to come up with conclusions that Donald Trump wants. So.
Okay. As long as you're on the record saying there are government commissions that will cherry pick data.
Oh, absolutely.
I will call that a victory. What I would point out, and this is my pitch always on things like voter ID laws, is the problem so much with the data is if you're not prohibiting it, then you're not measuring it. If there are 2 bars in town, and maybe this is going back years ago. But say you're in a college town, there's 2 bars. One is very judicious in terms of how they card people. The other is not. Now you might go to the bar that says that doesn't card people and say any underage drinking going on here, and they would properly respond, no, there is absolutely no evidence that anyone is underage here. So I mean that's kind of the thing is look, if you're not keeping track, not prohibiting it, there's no way to tell that it's happening. Now look, I'm still saying I think that that activity is marginal. It's not millions of votes. It's probably tens of votes, hundreds of votes. But it's still, if we're going to defend the integrity of the ballot, then we need to do that.
Well, and I certainly agree that we should defend the integrity of the ballot. And in fact, states do band together to do this. There are two main programs. One, and this is the one in Kansas that's run actually by Kansas, is called Crosscheck, and it's I think there were 38 states involved in Crosscheck, and it's a way where they share information on registrations and various other things, so they can try to match people to make sure that there aren't double registrations. The problem with Crosscheck is it relies on a very limited set of information. There's actually a lot better program out there that 21 states use called ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, that looks through a much fuller database of things and has a lot fewer false positives. But Kovac isn't interested in pushing ERIC, even though it's better. He's interested in pushing Crosscheck, which also has much more stringent guidelines or recommendations for booting people if they're wiping registrations if they're dual registered, whereas ERIC is, I think, by far a much better program, but that one doesn't have nearly as much traction among conservatives because I think it doesn't give you as many false positives. So I'm all in favor of setting up a system where the states work together to make sure that people are only registered in one place and people can't, even if they wanted to, vote in more than one place. But we need to do this in a way that makes sense and doesn't unintentionally disenfranchise anyone.
Yeah. So let me just tell you one quick story, because I know we're running a little late. Two quick stories. The first is, there was a time in my life where I was double registered. I will come clean on this, Mike. I don't know whether you knew about this or not, but it was my freshman year in college. I had registered in my hometown through our government class, and then when I went away to school, I was constantly badgered by young Republicans to register in Cuyahoga County, to which I finally relented, and I just sort of assumed that somehow, somewhat, the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections would contact the Mahoning County Board of Elections and let them know. And I was surprised when I got a notification saying you request an absentee ballot for Mahoning County. So I could have voted twice in that election, and I could have gotten away with it, but I didn't. Because I'm a good guy, and George Bush was going to be fine anyway. So I mean, that's one story about how these things happen, and if people are unscrupulous, they could take advantage of that.
But they don't.
But go ahead.
I'm saying, but they don't for the. I mean, in almost no case do they. And again, I am in favor of a system that checks for that sort of thing. I am in favor of a system that makes sense and does everything possible to make sure that people aren't accidentally disenfranchised. And so you and I probably agree on that. I mean, and I know that you are a well-intentioned, I think this is part of the problem, part of the reason why you are so resistant to the idea that many Republicans are doing this to make sure that fewer Democrats vote. It's because that's something you would never do. You would find that repugnant. And if more Republicans were like you, exactly. It would be a better place.
Concern, but the Democrats wouldn't.
Not enough Republicans are like you, unfortunately. So anyway, your second story.
Well, my second story was, this is in the 2004 presidential election. I started receiving at our house all sorts of literature from progressive causes and candidates who I'm usually not on the mailing list. And then we also noticed that they were addressed to people who didn't actually live in our house but had the same last name as we did. We came to learn, after checking with the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, that there were 4 additional people who had been registered to vote in our house by an outfit called MoveOn.org. I don't know if you ever heard of them. But they were active in voter registration back in those days. And it turned out there were a bunch of people who just had different first names, but the same last name, same address. The reason for this was the way these folks were paid. To go out and get registered voters, they were paid by the name. So they would look up in a phone book or on the internet and find an address with a valid voter and just add numerous family members, turn it in, and get their whatever, $1, $2 per name. There was also a program in Toledo where voter registration activists were given the option of being paid in crack or cash. for names, and some chose to crack, and then there were some prosecutions resulting from that. But my point is, again, I actually went to the polls, and I could see when I signed in these lists of other people with my same last name at my same address who were not real people. Now, in this case, I don't think there was an attempt to create voter fraud in the terms of actually someone showing up and voting. It was more just someone essentially defrauding MoveOn.org, which I got to take a little bit of pleasure from. But it would have been very easy, absent somehow some voter ID law, which Ohio has, of someone walking in and saying, "Hi, I'm Bill Carson. I live at this address. Can I vote?" They would say sure. So those are the reasons why I want to point again to look. This is just me, and I've had these sort of two experiences. It's out there, and I think there are reasonable steps we can take to safeguard the integrity of our system without disenfranchising anyone.
I don't disagree, but I'm sure you don't disagree that people tend to overestimate the severity of problems when they've been exposed to them personally. I mean, it's a common thing, and certainly you know that anecdotes aren't evidence. And so,
I'm a victim, Mike.
yes,
I've been
exactly,
victimized.
and victims tend to overestimate. If someone has been a victim of crime, thinks that crime is more prevalent and so forth. Not to say that you would ever be, victim to any sort of cognitive biases or anything like that. But anyway, okay, let's move on. It's time for What We're Reading, where we step back from the crazed pace of the news cycle and talk about the more in-depth, thoughtful things we're reading, listening to, or watching. Jay, do you want to start this week, or you want me to?
Well, I'll start. And this is actually sort of funny because it's not really a big piece. It's not even a political thing, but it's something I thought you'd like. And again, this is from the Wall Street Journal. Sort of a not really an op-ed commentary written by my favorite playwright, David Mamet. And the title is Charles Dickens Makes Me Want to Throw Up. And I thought you would enjoy that. And in this commentary, he extols the virtues of Anthony Trollope and his obvious superiority to Dickens. And I just thought you would really get a kick out of that. And I mean, every now and again, I throw these sort of things out just because, part of the conservative mindset, at least my, view of it, is there's so much out there in the world beyond politics. And I think it's sort of part of the conservative cause is to get people looking and reading and doing stuff that isn't overtly political. And I love this kind of stuff, literary criticism. I'm a big David Mamet fan. And if you're familiar with his work and sort of, compared to Dickens's work, you can see where he would be not a fan. Mamet is also one of the few conservatives in Hollywood. And I always give him credit for that. So that's my just little fun, completely non-political. It's not really a big picture thing, but I thought you'd like it because it trashes Dickens and praises Trollope.
Yeah, you know how I feel about Trollope. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have a picture of him right here on my desk. I am a huge Trollope fan, so I'm definitely going to go and read that right after we are done. I think even before I do post production on the show. So here's mine for this week. It's another podcast, and it's called "My History Can Beat Up Your Politics," which I think is a great title.
I like that. I like the sound of that. Yeah.
And basically, it's by a guy who's been doing this for a long time, Bruce Carlson, whose whole point is to try to give people that historical context. And I reached out to Bruce and asked him if he'd come on the show for a few minutes and talk a little bit about his podcast, what he does, and so forth. And so I'll just play that for you right now. Hi, Bruce. So I was hoping we could start by you just telling listeners a little bit about My History Can Beat Up Your Politics, what it's about, what you try to do with the show, that sort of thing.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. My History Can Beat Up Your Politics is a podcast that looks at history and applies it to the events and the politics of today. And so often there's only a little bit, if any, of historical context at all in political discussions today. So we take layers and layers of history, sometimes going back to the founding of the republic or before, and apply it to political events. So whether we're talking about something like healthcare, and putting that into a historical context of, there was a time when healthcare wasn't necessarily a good thing. It might actually kill you. So it wasn't something that was always something that was seen as a universal good or governments were out to fund. Ben Franklin used to say, in the street he would see many old drunks, but few old doctors. And that was the kind of skeptical view that many Americans had towards healthcare. So when you see things in that context, you start to understand about today's debates in a better way. Like, well, how come we don't have universal healthcare as a universal right? Well, it might not have been something thought about in the 18th century to add to the list of rights at that time, at least. So that kind of context is important. We looked at the emoluments issue recently and went all the way back to George Washington, because for many folks, President Trump's activities are mirror to George Washington's and his G. Washington flower that went to various countries and all around the United States. And he had a thriving business throughout his entire presidency. So looking at things like that help inform the debates of today. We're not going to push one side or the other in most cases. There might be some general concepts I feel strongly about, like voter turnout or things like that, or free speech. Not controversial, but we are going to try to provide more context to elevate the discussion.
Right. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more about the lack of context in so much of the media, I think, and how having that context can give us so much of a better sense of what's really going on and why it's going on, which is why I think your podcast is so valuable. I'm a listener, and just recently I heard your episode on who was it who talked about the history of the president's daily brief, and that was just wow, that was just a fascinating story, really.
Oh, David Priest. Yes, he's a national security expert, and he's also a bit of a presidential historian, particularly on that side of things. National security is so important to understanding a presidency. And yeah, that he was also a listener of the program. Yeah, I just, somewhere around 2006, when this podcasting technology was developed, it was a lot harder to do then, by the way. It was a a lot of steps to go through. We were using phone lines at that time. I started, I've always been an avid reader of history books, sometimes older ones and obscure ones, uh, and just starting to put together my knowledge, because I just found it so common in talking and having conversations with my friends. And I'd be like, well, are you aware that this is actually not a new thing at all? And or we're facing a presidential midterm. Looks like the president of this party is going to lose seats, because the president usually loses seats in their party in the first year midterm. This has happened all the way since well, not really Washington, but that was his second year midterm, but second term midterm, I should say. But this is a very common thing, and you start to find that you're saying it a lot. And then I said, I could start talking about this on a cast, and the audience grew over time, and we've got happy to have a number of listeners, many of whom are professors, history teachers, and the like. I myself was a literature major, and I originally wanted to do a history of literature. I still do want to do it at some point.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of podcasts I listen to, I'm a political scientist, and so many of them are just telling me things that I already know. And that's another thing I love about your podcast is invariably I learn things that I didn't know, and they really help to inform my understanding of this, which is why I think what you're doing is so valuable, and I certainly hope you'll be able to continue doing it for a long time to come.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Michael. Much appreciated.
All right. Well, I think that just about does it for this week, Jay. Yep. All right. So, folks, that's it for this episode. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We do hope you like what you heard and that you will check out today's sponsors, Dollar Shave Club, where new members get their first month of the Executive Razor with the tube of their Dr. Carver Shave Butter for only $5 with free shipping by going to dollarshaveclub.com/TPG. And ZipRecruiter, where Politics Guys listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free by going to ziprecruiter.com/politicsguy. We also hope you'll consider joining our new Politics Guys Insiders program, where supporting the show financially comes with exclusive extras like special updates, more commentary, additional episodes, and lots more. You can check it out on our Patreon page, patreon.com/politicsguys, or at politicsguys.com, where you can also check out our free newsletter that goes out once a week to everyone. And if you want to support the show without spending anything and you don't want anything else in your email inbox, you can share this episode with your friends and followers or pass it along. Our new show posts and tweets on Facebook and Twitter, pass those along. That would be great. And of course, leaving reviews and ratings on iTunes is also a big help. And if you want to get in touch with us, we're at mail@politicsguys.com. You can also reach us at facebook.com/politicsguys page, where we post all kinds of stuff every week. We're also on Twitter at politicsguys. The executive producers of the Politics Guys are Michael Baranowski, Jay Carson, Trey Orndorff, and Bruce Johnson. The show was produced by Michael Baranowski. We'll be back with a new show on Wednesday. We hope you'll join us.